The cosmoplex grows like a weed, warping and spiraling into the sky forever. Massive structures of steel and stone built in a pile, one on top of the other, on top of the other. The lower down, the older and more ruined, as if the towers seek to outrun decay itself. Near their peak, they begin to disappear into the black and red ocean of clouds above. Sunlight can never pierce the shadows of the megastructures, nor the dense smoke and rolling nuclear fog. Some of the buildings are ornate, decorated with glass and marble, not in the slums. Windows are shattered, brick cracked, and steel rusting, rooftops coated in the ash which falls like snow. The megastructures of the zone are the corpses of castles and fortresses, decomposing giants watching over the dense maze of ruins, alleyways, and shantytowns below, holding up the sky. Their bellies burn with the fires of factories, breathing in the smoke and exhaling poison. The streets are an asphalt spiderweb, devoid of any semblance of design or meaning. Down below, under the shadows of the obelisks, the hulks of abandoned machinery sleep alongside piles of trash and refuse. Spewing from cracked street lamps and pouring out of the seams of the concrete Goliaths is the synthetic sun. The suicide lights paint the tangled labyrinth in blues and reds, greens and purples. The UV lights bathe the ruined concrete landscape in neon, shifting and floating as if filtered through the ocean waves. From the cracks in the ruins or tears in the street, strange fungi push out from the darkness, maggots festering in the cadavers of concrete titans, grabbing hungrily at the artificial sunlight. Their colors, as numerous as their forms, give the impression of a city submerged in the ocean for hundreds of years. Layers of coral and urchins collect on the surfaces of structures like skin. Nests of cables and pipes bushwhack their way through the architecture haphazardly, as the buildings slowly begin to crumble into one another, and new ones are built on top of their fallen predecessors. The city is ravenously cannibalizing itself, and growing taller atop mountains of its own waste. In the shadows of this impossible urban hell is where we ply our trade. We fight for the right to live another day. This whole world is sick, dying, or maybe it's already dead. A festering, bloating, rotting rock. We were foolish to think it could ever be saved.
How close do I need to be to the microphone for it to pick stuff up?
I was gonna, we're recording right now. Oh my god.
Oh my god!
What's happening?
What's up, guys? I've been moving different.
This is so weird because for some reason...
Get out of here! Saint your mom and dad's tabletop game.
I can't fucking do this!
Yeah. What's up, guys? Spiderfly here on the World Wide Web. And I've got something exciting. I've got some never-before-seen things, big things happening in the background. A little something I've been cooking up in the darkness of a spider-infested basement. World events, war, politics, class divide. You've been waiting. What is going to save us? What is going to get us out of this place we're in? I don't have the answers. I don't know why you would think that. But what I do have is a pretty nifty little distraction. Welcome to Geto Ratz. So what is Geto Ratz all about? What even is it? Geto Ratz is a tabletop role-playing game. It's on a D20 based system, brand new system, never before seen. But why Geto Ratz? Why play this? What separates it from any other game? There's a lot of them out there. Well, if you want to understand the rules of Geto Ratz, you want to understand the book, you got to understand the world that the game is set in. My elevator pitch for this game has always been sort of if you like games like The Last of Us with a cyberpunk twist, a little bit of Wild West or maybe Industrial Revolution to kind of sweeten the pot a bit. If we're breaking it down into parts, that's kind of the vibe you're going to get. But I believe Geto Ratz really is more than the sum of its parts. It has a bit of all that flavor, and if you go into it with that kind of state of mind, you're going to grasp it really quickly. But this isn't a power fantasy game. Uh, it can be. It can turn into that. But this isn't a game where you're going to go straight into it. You're leading armies. You're vanquishing enemies. It's a game where you're going to go hungry. It's a game where you're going to wake up and realize, oh, I need to get some algae noodle ramen or it's all over. Half the fun of the game is trying to pay back your medical bills. And if that's too real, it might be too real. But if that, if you want to escape through a world that is even worse than your own, that's what this is really all about. Okay, so what separates Geto Ratz apart from other systems and other games? Mechanically, for me, it kind of falls into four different categories. It's a D20 based system, so it's not going to be anything too unfamiliar if you played games like this before. That being said, the skill checks and the skills in the game have been a lot more streamlined. Some games have too many skills. Some games, in my opinion, don't have enough. I think we kind of hit a healthy medium. Secondly, social system. One thing I've struggled with a lot in games is making it feel like your characters are actually from the world that you're playing in. That they have pasts, that they have futures, that they have histories, that they have relationships with other people. And without spoiling too much, there's a system in this book that allows you to do all of this really quickly, really comfortably, and it lets your players also take a lot of agency when you're telling stories, when you're dealing with things like rumors, secrets, tracking people down, calling up old friends, bumping into old enemies. That's all kind of in there, and it does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. Thirdly, combat. That's going to get its whole own thing, but I'll just say this. No initiative. No initiative system. You don't need the initiative trackers. You don't need to roll 100 dice of like, okay, I got an 18, you got a... None of that. It's super straightforward. But yeah, there's going to be a lot more of that in the future. Lastly, sandbox. I am maybe in the smaller group for feeling this way. I feel like crunch has sort of become a bit of a lost art in tabletop games. There's a lot of people making rules light, narrative focused storytelling systems, and that's great. And those games are super cool, and they're really rewarding, and they offer new experiences, and they're great for people that haven't played these kinds of games before. But I find very rarely do they have the depth to become a forever system. You might do a one shot as a palate cleanser between campaigns. You might do 2-3 sessions. Maybe you play it a bunch of times, but I find it's almost always those kind of more robust systems that you're going to come back to. And the reality is, we've learned a lot about game design since those kind of games were made. They often have not always aged as well. They're sometimes more complicated than they have to be. We just know more about where we can streamline and where we can have that depth. And that's really what I wanted to do with this game. I wanted a game that had the depth and the complexity that it was hard to master, and you could get, I mean, I've got easily tens of thousands of hours out of this game. And we still keep coming back. Players, we still have a good time. You know, we haven't got quite sick of it yet. The other thing, too, is just like sandbox mechanics. This is something I look for in almost any game I pick up or almost any game I kind of get into. It's not going to be for everybody, but this game is more for sandbox style games. So you're going to have mechanics for traveling, you're going to have mechanics for cooking, for food, you're going to have mechanics for customizing equipment, all kinds of things like that. At its core, the systems in Geto Ratz, I believe, are easy to learn, hard to master. You're going to get a lot of playtime out of it. You're going to get a lot of depth out of it. There is a pretty high skill ceiling for the kinds of builds you can make. And that is because, another thing important to note, this is not a class-based game. Geto Ratz, you are essentially picking from flaws, using those flaws to buy perks, to buy stats, and you can really flesh out any kind of build that way. You can do some really insane things, and you can really kind of get the game to play how you want it to play. The system overall is very modular. There's certain mechanics that are kind of hard to pull out and just do away with completely, but it is really easy to take what you like and make the game focus and revolve around that. Roguelite mechanics. That's the other thing I want to talk about with this, because that's a part of the game that kind of surprisingly I haven't really seen in many other tabletop role-playing games. There's a lot of games that handle death well. There's a lot of games that account for player death, or not player death, that account for character death, and even games that are built around character death. I don't see many with meta progression between characters. I'm sure they exist. I'm sure I'm not the only one who've thought of it. But Geto Ratz is really built around that idea that you're building a character from scratch, you're taking flaws, you're taking perks, you're making your own unique build, and then you're failing. You're dying over and over and over again. Your character's meeting these tragic ends, but every character you lose, it just kind of gives more resources to your next characters. I say it's a game that's not big on power fantasy, about starting off kind of at the bottom. But you get through enough characters, eventually you can get to that place where now you're starting at a higher level, better equipment. Every failure is just setting you up for more success down the line. And so even though it's a game that can be punishing, it can be difficult, it's never a waste of time. It's never an entirely lost cause. That kind of leads me to this. What do I want to do with this channel? What are these videos going to be about? What's this series going to be about kind of overall? For me, what I really want this to be is just an easy companion piece. It's a big risk, and it's a big jump taking on a new system. It's also a lot reading like a 300-page rulebook. Unfortunately, that's kind of the thing with games like this. You gotta read the instructions. Everyone's least favorite part of doing a game. I kind of want this series to make that process a bit easier. So each video, for the foreseeable future, whenever this comes out, I want to be doing chapter by chapter, kind of brass tacks. What are the important takeaways? Going over certain mechanics so it's just a little easier kind of to digest and break down. And then if you are hoping to run this game, and if you're doing that, thanks, that's awesome. But if you want to have videos kind of to send to players and be like, instead of making them read the book or buy a copy for themselves, being able to send them a couple videos just to give the basic breakdown so it's a bit easier come game night when you just want to jump right into it. You don't have to spend a bunch of time group reading. You wants to do that. The other thing is obviously to promote the book, but also kind of to break down, like, you know, the DLC is going to be just around the corner. Different updates for, you know, kind of advice on like how I run the game. That'll probably be a bit further down the line, but resources that I use. Certain things will be up on the website. I'll probably put a link somewhere when the website's done. But yeah, that'll have things like character sheets, the market, more on that later. But yeah, I don't know. This is more just kind of, you can get a bit more of a stream of consciousness. What was I thinking? Which rules are actually important? Which are there just kind of to be there? And yeah, what's the best way to run this game and get into it? Because at the end of the day, that's what this is. If you've come this far, maybe you've bought the book already. If you have, thank you. That's super cool. And now I just kind of want to help with everything that comes after. So yeah.